Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Carnival thrones will be empty this week as the COVID dragon keeps the villagers off the streets. We'll look at what the numbers are saying and how those who are wearing a different type of mask are adapting. We'll also revisit Ironton, a settlement in Plaquemines Parish that was once without water and is now facing the possibility of oil company construction over an historic slave cemetery. Our Future Watch segment looks at the status of education as the pandemic continues, and we will also look at upcoming elections. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Dave Cohen, news director, WWL Radio, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and David Hammer, investigative reporter, WWL TV Channel 4. All right, let's go on over to Dave first, and the latest on COVID and vaccines and numbers and how we're looking.
Well, let's start with the positives.
Okay.
The good news is that there are only 1,001 COVID patients in hospitals in Louisiana as of today, according to the Louisiana Department of Health. That's lower than it was right before Thanksgiving. So we have essentially now made it through that third surge, that huge spike we saw as a result of Thanksgiving, then Christmas, then New Year's. So it's encouraging that steps have been taken, people have been listening, and we've gotten to a point where we've been able to turn around that huge surge after the holidays. Unfortunately, we just had Super Bowl Sunday. We don't yet know how that may or may not impact numbers, and we're about to go into the weekend run up to Fat Tuesday, and of course the huge concern has been that we're going to see another surge, at least locally, as a result of that. So we know about the concentrated efforts to try and prevent another super spreader Mardi Gras. What's not clear is if that message is being digested and heard. It clearly wasn't for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. A lot of people clearly heard the warnings and ignored them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a third surge. So will we have a fourth surge locally? We don't know. At the same time, the state has now administered almost 700,000 vaccine shots. Of those, 217,000 are second doses. Mm-hmm. So more and more people now are getting their second dose. Another almost 500,000 have gotten their first dose. So we're making progress there as well, not nearly as fast as anyone would like, but there is progress being made. So there's some good news.
Of course, we've seen this week in Jefferson Parish a couple of sort of mass vaccination events, drive-through, where Jefferson Parish is saying, they just wanted to do a test run. So I guess we'll be seeing more of those down the line, too, as we get more doses.
Absolutely. And the most recent one at Zephyr Field, where Ochsner administered 1,000 vaccinations in one day, they want to be able to do that to a point where they're doing multiple mass vaccination events across the state every day. If they can get the supplies, they say they've now tested it and they're ready to go. And they think they could start doing tens of thousands of vaccines every day if they have the supply to do it. So the next question is, okay, if they can get the supply, they've tested the system, they can do it, will enough people take it? Sadly, we found out this week through an Associated Press poll that at least a third of people say they absolutely will not or probably will not take the vaccine when it's available to them. And LSU Health New Orleans said that's not enough. They need 80 to 85% of people to take the vaccine for us to achieve herd immunity, even when you consider all the people who have already had and survived COVID in the community. They say 80 to 85% of people have to take the shot. Otherwise, we're not going to knock it out. So this fight will continue until and unless we can do that. So that's kind of the bad news side of it, that while we are seeing encouraging trends and encouraging numbers, we don't know if we can really make it to that light at the end of the tunnel unless there's significant changes in public perception and approach.
Yeah. So mitigation is still really key right now, like no big gatherings, which, of course, we saw in the past week here in New Orleans. That's why the mayor has actually shut down some bars.
Absolutely. And, well, all bars are closed now through Fat Tuesday, but they have closed a total of 9 bars indefinitely now for breaking the protocols and the rules. And, City Hall got feisty this week with straight out accusing bars of intentionally going around the rules, using back doors to let more people in than are supposed to be let in so that they can't be seen coming into the establishments. Luring students into their death traps was one of the phrases we heard from City Hall this week, about some of the behavior of bars across the city. And we're hearing a stronger and stronger unified message from city leaders that this is not only a French Quarter issue, is not only a Marigny issue, but it's a citywide issue. And the chief of police today brought in state troopers and deputies from the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, about 1,200 police in all, that are going to, from now through Fat Tuesday, go citywide to make sure that not only are bars and restaurants not operating in violation. Bars are supposed to be completely closed. But the state fire marshal told us one of his big concerns is these underground events where people are finding warehouses, storage units, other places where you wouldn't normally have a party, and they're turning them into party venues and having mass gatherings where they think they're flying under the radar. And he says one of the things they're going to focus on is finding and shutting those down so that we do not see another surge.
And of course,
if it's not a citywide issue, perhaps it's not a regional issue, though. Why do you think we don't see these same restrictions in Jefferson Parish and surrounding areas?
Well, we asked Jefferson Parish President Cynthia Lee Shang, and she said, unlike New Orleans, Jefferson doesn't have any area where there's a huge concentration of bars. There is no Bourbon Street in Jefferson Parish. You can go back to the history of Fat City, but there's nothing like that anymore in Jefferson Parish. And she insisted that working with her staff and with the state fire marshal, that they can make sure that bars can remain open and operate under the rules, which say they can only have 25% capacity. Since Jefferson Parish is now under 5% positivity, they can have 25% capacity with a maximum of 25 people in a bar at any time, and they can have outdoor availability as well. But she said they're going to stringently enforce it, and the fire marshal seemed to think that they can also, in not only Jefferson, but Plaquemine, St. Tammany, St. Bernard, all the surrounding parishes, enforce it as well.
So meanwhile, streets are closed in the Quarter, under Claiborne Overpass.
In the Marigny, the
in the Marigny. And then also
well.
parks, too. Audubon Institute closed the Fly, and also Waldenburg is not going to be open to potential of crowds gathering there. So people are serious. Do you want to touch on the mayor right now, or you want to do that toward the end of the show? I got to ask you, because we need to move on to the next segment.
Well, we'll wait. We'll bring that up a little bit.
Okay, all right. Let's move over to E right now and talk about Carnival, because, I mean, this would just be a real crush of Carnival crowds right now if things were normal.
Tonight would have been a huge night. The Friday night before Mardi Gras is when you have Coup d'etat and Hermes, and a lot of people coming into town by that time, and the big weekend really starts. I mean, the real bulk of the Mardi Gras season really starts with that Friday night, and so it's going to be felt around here. But yeah, with the restrictions this week, and they kept on coming, it might kind of made it a lot more difficult. I think there were a lot of people who might have thought, like with the police strike in '79, that there weren't any parades, but still it was a great day in the French Quarter,
right,
that you can go walk up and down Bourbon Street and Frenchman Street and do all those things. I know that's what I was thinking about doing, right? Now all of that is shut down too. And so it's like you've been kind of shut back at every corner, and so a lot of people are going to re-strategize. I don't know if they're going to go to Jefferson Parish and drink or what exactly it is. Meanwhile, I still tend to marvel at the creativity we've seen in Orleans Parish. We've mentioned the house decorations. And if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't driven along St. Charles, by the way, there might be a traffic backed up, but drive around town and see some of the creativity. And to me, one of the really amazing things with the floats and the oaks thing in City Park, it's amazing visually, but also how quickly it was created,
right,
from the very short period of time.
And sold out.
From the idea of concept to implementation. I never thought I'd see the Rex King's float or Buff Gras in City Park, but there they are, not far from a Bacchus float. So the city responded creatively. There are a lot of good ideas out there, But man, it's just you can't go too far with some sort of restriction facing you.
That's true. And of course, crews have adapted, with online presence, like Bacchus has done their online presence, and then other kind of festivals, recorded concerts and stuff like that. So the spirit is there, that's for sure.
What Bacchus has done with its online thing, they have a virtual parade and they have virtual throws, and there's a way with using your computer that you can click in if you caught one of the throws, and then go pick it up at the Bacchus headquarters. And amazingly, among the throws is a bicycles, that they have a whole group of bicycles. This will be the only parade ever where, in effect, bicycles were thrown from parades. And so it's a kind of creativity we've never seen before.
Right. And of course, here at WYES, we've had to adjust a little bit too. And there have been some special programs produced by Peggy with you on them as well. And we'll see something Mardi Gras night which will precede a replay of last year's meeting of the courts, right?
Yeah, they're going to show the meeting of the courts, which always does well. It's a very popular broadcast. And yeah, there'll be a pre-show just talking about Carnival that day and the things that happen.
So we will have our Mardi Gras night.
It's a good stage. It's a good place to be. If you're not going to leave home, watching Channel 12 is a good place to be.
It always is. Okay, E. Thanks a lot. David, let's go on over to you now and talk about, there's a community in Plaquemines Parish that has a very interesting history, and it's also had its fair share of challenges the residents there have, and now they're facing yet another challenge, and it regarding an historic cemetery that they're really worried about.
Yeah, this is a fascinating story about how history can cast a shadow. We're talking about Ironton. It's a community along the Mississippi River, south of Belle Chase on the west bank of the Mississippi, before you get to Point Lahash and down the river toward Venice. And it's a fascinating story because that community has had a lot of problems over the years. They didn't get running water and sewer service from the parish until 1980, and it took a expose by 60 Minutes that drew national attention for them to actually get those services. Mm-hmm. And so they've kind of toiled in the background for years and years and felt like they've been excluded. And now there's this planned oil tank farm or oil export facility to be built just north of Ironton. And it turns out that a lot of the residents there have ancestors who are buried in a cemetery there because that used to be the St. Rosalie Plantation. And the St. Rosalie Plantation is very historically significant. It was owned by a free black man before the Civil War named Andrew Durnford. He had actually bought it from John McDonough, a name that a lot of people will recognize as a benefactor to schools here in the city of New Orleans. And Andrew Durnford had slaves, and then those slaves died on the plantation, and their descendants ended up founding the town of Ironton. So a lot of the folks who lived there traced their ancestry back to the slaves who worked on the plantation. And they've known for many, many years that there were cemeteries there. The people in the community know it very well and have told leaders about it. But over the years, repeatedly, they have tried to do industrial developments on that site, including a nuclear power plant that was planned in the 70s until their bulldozers almost ran over or did run over the above ground tombs of the Durnford family. So over the years, it's been start and stop, start and stop. And once again, the Plaquemines Parish Port, which owns that property at St. Rosalie, was going to do another project with a private company developing this oil export terminal there until they went through a review process and found yet again that what they've known all along in Ironton, which is that there's historic cemeteries there. But that wasn't shared with the Port Commission until some public records were provided through other means from a member of the public to the commission chairman, Richie Blink, who asked the staff about it and said, why weren't we told? So it's another example of how things kind of seem to fly under the radar and things are going to happen there that the community doesn't want until it's exposed.
So what's the bottom line here, David? Is something, they escaped it once again, nothing will disturb the cemetery?
That's what they say. The law provides for that, and the community demanded answers at a meeting just last month, January 28th. The developers promised that they would protect the cemetery sites, the people in the community want to make sure they continue to have access to them, but they plan to build big tanks on top of these sites, and so they would have to change their project, their very expensive $20 million project, to do that. So we'll see, and we'll continue to watch to make sure that they follow through.
So we don't know if they're willing to make that change then.
They say that they are going to protect the site, but what that exactly means, we don't know yet, and we'll have to continue to watch. There's still a process through the State Historic Preservation Office to make sure that they follow the proper preservation. So we'll see what happens and make sure that they follow through.
So as you mentioned, I mean, it's sort of like repeatedly the folks there in Ironton have had a challenge like this to face. So what do they plan to do to safeguard this land and this sacred spot?
Well, the good thing is that this time there are allies on the council. This Richie Blink, who's the chairman, is a young white guy, but who has committed himself to fighting to preserve that property, preserve the cemeteries, and the port director, who had said that he wasn't aware of the cemetery's existence until very recently, says that they're dedicated to preserving it. And there's some talk about putting artifacts in a museum exhibit down there. They're also being preserved at the University of New Orleans, the rest of the artifacts. So there is real, groundswell to protect the area going forward. And of course, we put it on WWL TV this week, and so there's a lot of attention being paid to it now.
And I'm sure you're going to be keeping up with it and letting us know how it's developing. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, David, thanks a lot. Don, let's go on over to you. Challenges that facing the folks in Ironton and have for decades and decades and decades. More recently, we've been facing immediate challenges on how to conduct educating our children with this pandemic. I mean, people have had to make so many adjustments and changes. Kids have, teachers have, administrators have. How is it looking? How is it, we're at like a half school year into it. What's it turning out like?
I tell you what, we look better than a lot of other states, which you don't often say about Louisiana education. As of right now, about 60% of Louisiana students are, and this is pre-K through 12 or K through 12 level, are actually enjoying some kind of in-person learning. You talk to folks around the country. I know people in Michigan and in North Carolina and other locations where students have truly been home and not among their peers since March. And studies nationwide are finding that students really aren't doing well psychologically when that happens, that the psychological health of the children is also being affected. So forget their education, they still need to stay mentally happy too. And in Louisiana, we're doing a pretty good job of that, and science is showing that schools have not become super spreader events even while they're open. So that's good. What they don't know yet is where is the unfinished, as they call it, learning? Where did kids get lost between March and right now? There is always unfinished learning every year, whether it's summer slide or kids who got sick. There are always kids who need some help getting caught up. But there are some new resources in place to help children of that nature. There's a new plan in the state called Accelerate. It's a tutoring plan, and instead of holding kids back, it's to get them the knowledge they need at the same time they're getting the new knowledge. So they're pairing the two together. If it's math and you missed that skill last year, you're going to still learn this year's skill, but you're going to get last year's skill at the same time and make it work so that you can stay on track. Our state is not giving up on standardized assessments. We are not going to be seeking a waiver from the federal government, at least at this point in time, because the Secretary of Education said it's too important, that the data that comes from those assessments is too important to the schools, the families, the teachers, everybody to kind of know where people are. What will change, though, is 4th and 8th graders are still going to go forward. Those assessments aren't going to be so critical to teacher evaluations, schools getting grades. They're trying to have the assessments so that they can have the data, but not have them be deadly to a school system in terms of how they're funded, or a teacher, whether it's to keep his or her job, or a student, whether or not to go forward. but to know where we actually are so that we can address the needs where they are.
Right. So the schools will not be graded this year? Is that the
They'll
way
be
it's looking?
graded, but in a you know, and it's a detailed process. I can't go into it super quickly, but the standardized tests aren't going to be the end all and be all of school grades this year. We also have found with this pandemic a way to be really, really flexible with education in terms of some virtual, some hybrid, some in person, some out of person, and a lot of that will likely stick around even when the pandemic is over. That we found a way to reach kids sometimes where they are, or families where they need to be, and that part isn't going away. One thing where we know there are going to be issues down the road is in March and through this into the summer, 70% of the licensed daycare and child care centers in the state were shut down completely. So some of that early childhood learning, the kindergarten readiness that happens, was not happening. As of right now, it's just 1%. So from 70% shuttered to 1% shuttered. So that's very good news for the youngest children in our systems. Go ahead.
Yeah, would you say that right now most of our students are now doing in-person learning, or at least perhaps maybe in our region, or is it sort of split between virtual and in-person?
It's 60% statewide who are doing some in-person. In our region, for example, Jefferson Parish is mostly in, St. Tammany Parish is mostly in Orleans Parish, elementary and middle schools are mostly in person, but high schools aren't back yet after the Christmas break. They have not gone back yet. So it's kind of it's hit or miss, and it's the older children mostly who are not in school in person.
So looking forward to the beginning of the next school year, the fall of 2021, are they saying anything about that? Or
there is talk around the nation. There's not necessarily talk here yet that there might be the need to be. I almost hate to say this on television. There might be the need to be prepared for virtual learning again in the fall, or some combination, depending on the success of the vaccine rollout. You have, there are teachers who want to know they're safe going to school, and administrators and students too. So it's a possibility that this virtual word isn't going away yet.
So over these months, though, I know that whole practice of virtual learning has been sharpened. The skills have been sharpened, and people are getting a little bit more used to it. So as you said, perhaps some of that is going to stay with us.
Well, and, think about a child who maybe is ill and in chemotherapy or other treatment where they really can't be in school. Well, guess what? Now they have a way to stay on track with their peers and still get the medical treatment they need. Or a family that's had a crisis, or we're in the middle of a hurricane. We've learned now pretty well that there are ways to reach kids where they are and keep them learning at the same time.
All right, Dawn, thanks a lot. E, let's go back on over to you. You wanted to talk about elections that are before us.
And because they're more before us than most people probably realize, that 5 months from this coming Monday, which would be July 14th, qualifying begins in the mayor's race. This is city elections for mayors and city council. Qualifying will be July 14th and July 16th. So far, no one, at least anybody's aware of popularly, there is no competition for the incumbent mayor. That could surface, but there's no one talking right now. But our current city charter was established in 1954, and that charter allowed mayors to have 2 successive terms. Their term limited after 2. There is yet to be a mayor who, once elected to a term, was defeated for a second term, and so precedent would certainly be on the side of Mayor Cantrell. Now, also on the ballot, though, will be the city council elections. 7 city council members. We know for sure there's going to be at least 1 vacancy, and that's Jason Williams' vacancy for council at large. Right now, there's an interim council member, Donna Glapian, who's serving that seat, but she's not allowed to run for it because she's just an interim appointment. And so we know there'll be at least 1 vacancy there, and maybe one of the district council members will run for that vacancy, and so maybe there'll be a second vacancy. So those would be the major things. It could be a big election, or it could really not be much. At the least, if the mayor doesn't have any serious opposition, it could just be that 1 council at large election, or we'll just see.
If someone is going to challenge Mayor Cantrell, At this point, it almost has to be someone who is independently wealthy
Absolutely.
and well-funded, because if anyone were raising money to run against her, we'd know about that at this point, and we have heard of nobody who has been making a concentrated effort to challenge her. So it seems at this point, unless there's a very wealthy dark horse who wants to fund their own campaign and believes they can beat her, that we're probably not going to see any serious challengers. And she is essentially, while there may be a few people who get on the ballot, as we frequently see, she will, for all intent and purpose, be unopposed.
Unless something really goes bad with COVID between now and then. But I think COVID is the stabilizing factor, that this is, we're in a crisis. And it's a lot of times that in a crisis, it's like during a war, that you don't necessarily want to change leaders during a war. And it might be that same sort of mentality there.
While we're talking about Mayor Cantrell, I'm going to go back to David right now, David Cohen, because you also wanted to talk about COVID and the mayor and the White House.
Yeah, well, the mayor was very excited that she was going to the White House today to be part of a group, mostly of governors from around the country, who were meeting in the Oval Office with the president and the vice president to talk about the stimulus package and what they would like to see in it. When she arrived at the White House, as everybody does, she went through the COVID screening and she failed her COVID screening. She got a positive test result back for the quick test they did at the White House, so she couldn't be a part of that meeting. She then went to a testing facility in Washington, D.C., and got the more thorough testing, and that came back negative. So her office says that she has no symptoms, they do not believe she has COVID, and that she is flying back to New Orleans tonight, and unfortunately without having had a chance to meet with the president and vice president.
That's a shame. She had just gotten her first shot this week too, right?
Yeah, and now that has they say that would have no bearing on the false positive, but it did for a couple of hours there make people wonder, oh my goodness, does the mayor, who's been one of the harshest on fighting COVID and who has had some of the most strict restrictions in the nation, could she have contracted COVID? At this point, it appears she has not.
She has not. Okay. Other stories. E, over to you.
Well, getting past back to Mardi Gras, throughout the state, Mardi Gras is pretty much shut down, any town that has Carnival. But what one city has done, kind of interesting, Bossier City, Saturday night, they're having a night market, and their equivalent of floats in the Oaks is to put floats together by an outside market and have people go and shop. So they have floats and music, and at least try to make some money off of this.
They'll have the spirit. Okay, David, real quick. Hammer.
Yeah, just today, a key figure representing victims of church sex abuse was ousted from his position. My colleague Ramon Vargas and I have a story up on WWLTV.com and NOLA.com.
All righty. Thanks, David. Don, real quick.
For the first time in 3 years, we might have below freezing temperatures here, all in time for whatever will happen on Mardi Gras Day. So bundle up to go out and look at the house floats, I guess.
Okay. Dave?
Well, one of the biggest headlines out of Louisiana this week has been the woman who put Gorilla Glue in her hair in St. Bernard Parish. She has gone to California, where a plastic surgeon said he was successful in removing all of the Gorilla Glue. She has made thousands of dollars on a GoFundMe page in the meantime and is considering a lawsuit.
Okay, yeah, that's a big story. That and a cat on Zoom. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for watching. See you next week for Informed Sources. Happy Mardi Gras. Have a good evening.